Hello?
Yeah, it's the opening line to the podcast.
Is anybody
Oh.
home?
If you're
All
watching the
right.
live recording, you're just going to see this the whole time. But if you're on Spotify, you have no idea there's any difference.
This little flashing light here.
Yeah.
My little orb.
Yep.
Um, all right, y'all. Well, we're back. We're back with Garrett. I'm so excited about this. And it was funny because I had wanted to do this episode and Garrett texted me at the right time because I was trying to plan what episode I was going to do by myself. And so this just worked out really well. So, Garrett, I think we just have like this type of telepathy, as you guys will also notice in our chat today. We were going through our notes and it was basically similar, like piggybacking off of each other without even planning together. So,
Yep.
yeah.
We
So,
chatted for 30
Garrett,
minutes before this.
yeah,
Forgot we were
yeah.
doing the podcast, honestly. Let's do it.
So, we'll be talking for like probably in total like an hour and a half, but it's all good stuff. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I have a little icebreaker. So before I started doing my icebreakers and I kind of stopped, so I'm bringing them back, y'all. What's your morning routine?
Um, well, bold of you to assume I have a morning routine. I'm gonna keep it real with you. Depends on the day. My days are all over the place. There's different start times depending on the day. But on my earlier starts, let's see, if I have to be at a client for 7 and I'm out the house by 6:40, my first alarm goes off at approximately 6:09. I snooze it.
Oh, nine.
6:15, I snooze it. 6:20, probably snooze that one. 6:25, usually get up, and it involves me taking 10 to 15 minutes of throw my clothes on, fill up my water, grab an energy drink, and I'm in the car. That's my water routine. Done.
Does that not stress you out?
No, me trying to have a morning routine stresses me out.
There's two people in this world. Two types.
I also yeah, I've never been a morning person. I've always been a night owl, and I chose the wrong profession. Well, I chose the wrong clientele. I should truthfully be doing night clients, but here I am, mostly mornings. So just recently, I had a lot of 4 a.m. wake ups for 5 a.m. clients. So 4 days a week, I was doing 5 a.m. starts. So I was up at between like 4:15, 4:30. That was hard. If you never work at 4 is a different kind of early. Like there's 5:36, and then there's 4 in the winter,
Four is
especially
different.
when it's like pitch black, 38 degrees. Yeah, it's very hard to get out of bed. But just recently, I'm 7 a.m. start on those days, so it's a lot better. But most of those days, it's wake up and go. Like just get up, clothes on. Maybe I have something ready to eat. It's really bad. Don't take my advice. This is everything I don't tell my clients to do. I'm like, make sure you
It's
have
like,
food prepped. If you need to get food in for the day for your training, I'm over here like 4 hours of clients in before I have like my first breath of something. If that, sometimes I'll go from like 5 a.m. to literally noon. It's bad. I'm being real with you. It's just bad. Um, that's what we're working on this year. We're working on waking up a little earlier, not snoozing the 3 alarms, having something to eat, trying to. But that's my morning routine, literally.
you
I
know
don't
what?
have a morning routine.
I love that is working for you because for me, that would stress me out. Like that stresses me out so bad because so I'll wake up like an hour and a half before I need to be awake so I can have my coffee and like have my morning time because that is sacred to me because I am a morning person. So I'll make my breakfast. I'll like have a whole day before my day
I applaud you.
starts.
I'm someone who's like because it's so early for me, I will take every second of sleep I can get because I naturally don't fall asleep. Like if I got to be up at 5 or 4, like I can go to bed at 8 p.m. for 8 hours of rest. It's just not happening. I try, it doesn't happen. Realistically, it's more like 10ish. So maybe I'm getting like 5 to 6 hours of sleep on those days. Not ideal. So I will take every minute in bed. If you're telling me I got to get up at like 3:30 to make breakfast, nope,
Yeah, no
nope.
way. Three
4:15,
o'clock.
4:30 out the door.
3 o'clock and 4 o'clock is like it's still yesterday type of thing. Like that's what it feels like. Like it just
Yeah.
feels like no one should be up at that time. And then the times I've been up at that time, I'm like, why are people out driving already? Like, have they
Yeah.
gone to sleep today or have they just been up the whole night? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's different.
That's nowadays I'm not that early. Yeah, I'll wake up, whatever. I'll eat something, chill out until I go do a client or whatever it is. But if it's early start day, if it's starting any earlier than like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., I'm probably just waking up and going, truthfully. I take every
That's
minute I can get
fair.
sleeping and I just grab an energy
That's
drink
fair.
and I'm fueled for 4 hours.
Fueled until you crash, and then you just gotta fuel up again.
Actually, I don't get
Yep.
crashed. I have one energy drink a day and it's like really early in the day. Like when I wake, like it's part of my routine. That is my routine, truthfully. I grab my energy drink, my Ghost energy drink of various flavors, and I sip it on the car. And during my first one or two clients, at that point, I probably drank 200 milligrams of caffeine over like 2 or 3 hours. So it's like probably mostly placebo at that point, and I'm
Right.
good. It's just part of that is my
I
routine. The flavor of a Ghost energy to keep me going, and that's like if I don't have that in the morning, all hell will probably break loose. Truthfully, if I ever forget
I
it,
don't
if I
want to
just put it
know
in the
what
fridge overnight,
happens.
no, it's like the one thing I do is sip that energy drink. So, yep, there
What?
you go.
So another question, follow up. What's your favorite flavor?
I've tried every flavor. Oh God, I'll give you my top three in no particular order. Top three: green apple, Warhead's green apple, um, the cherry limeade, and it's a tie between the limited edition Strabango margarita and
Strawbango.
it's strawberry mango margarita.
I just like that word.
It's so the collaborator
Strawbango.
Max Tuning, he's a OG fitness YouTuber. Now he's just more like lifestyle stuff. He has a clothing brand and he made sour strips, which is this sour candy brand that you might see now. It's actually pretty big. Target, all these places. These sour candy belts. Anyways, he did a collaboration with them for his like birthday or whatever. And his favorite thing is like strawberry or like mango margaritas, frozen margaritas. So they made a flavor, Strawbango margarita. And it came out November of 22, and then it was gone after September, or sorry, September 22, and then it came back this past September as like a renewal. So I ordered like 3 cases of it.
That sounds.
That's
I
probably like my
want that
top three. Pink
margarita.
lemonade's also up there. Pink lemonade's really good too. I
I
have some
honestly,
arriving actually. They might be here actually right now.
I
I-
love lemonade.
yeah, no,
I was.
anything sour, I'm good.
It's so when I was at the beach, like I was in Florida a week ago, and we were playing spike ball on the beach, and we were like working up a sweat, and I'm like, I don't want any alcoholic beverage. I want freaking lemonade. Like that's just where I'm at in life now. It's
Dude, give
very
me a
wholesome.
margarita, a pina colada, or a lemonade. That's
True.
all I care about in life.
True.
That's it.
Very true.
It's done. On a beach, especially on a beach, it makes it 10 times better. It's like when mom makes a sandwich versus you. It's automatically better. Same energy.
Or this is something else that I have discovered. I'm sure everyone else has too that just maybe haven't acknowledged it yet. When somebody else is making toast, it just smells so much better than when you
Toast
make toast.
specifically.
Yeah, it's like when there's like toast,
Plain
like
old
bread
toast.
is like
I might
bread is
just give you it.
toasty.
I'm gonna be real with you. Like bread plus heat, the best thing I've ever smelled. Not bacon, bread, in a toaster oven.
Okay, listen, y'all back me up. Somebody needs to back me up here, please. It's like whenever I'm in the house and my boyfriend makes toast, it smells so much better than when I make it. So I think it's
That's like
just,
most food, though. I feel like anything that you don't make automatically makes it more appealing. Hence,
I don't
people
know, I just
saying,
think toast really stands out.
okay, maybe that's you. Maybe that's, hey, everyone's got their thing. I don't judge here. Toast is
Anyways, I
cool.
just
I'm all about
exposed
it.
myself.
Love
We
some
should change.
carbs. You're good.
Well, now that I just exposed myself, we should probably get into what this show is about. So
What is
today
this show
we're,
about? Because I feel like it changes every time we talk.
I know. Um, so we're talking about fitness myths today.
Oh, yes.
So we're talking about fitness myths and misconceptions. So we've got our own stuff here. We had our own notes, and we're gonna come together today and talk to you all about a few common things that we've heard about within our time in this field. And we're going to kind of, I guess, myth bust them, like
Yeah. And
Mythbusters.
I'd probably give you some realistic, helpful stuff to counteract those myths.
Right.
Like, here's some
We won't just say
applicable
it's
real world
wrong.
stuff that, yeah, I'll just say no and then on to the next.
It's like,
Basically, I'll counter, at least my stuff, I'll for sure counter and give you like realistic stuff too, not just like here's the numbers that you would hear in like a textbook, but like here's how after working with people in a lot of environments and different people, like what actually works and what you should probably apply to do as a normal person who's not making this like their career of bodybuilding or elite sport athlete. If you're the 0.1%, then that's you, but most people this will probably apply to. So
Yeah, 100%. So we'll give y'all some facts, and then we'll counter argue them and give you some tips. So some stuff that you can actively, start practicing, or maybe start to go down a rabbit hole and learn about a little bit more. Um, so number one, do you want to take that away from me,
you,
Garrett?
what is number one? You got
You pick.
I pick? No, you pick.
Yeah,
We'll bounce. You start
you.
and I'll say one after you. Some of these piggyback anyway, so we'll just
They do. They do. I think, well, number one, something I'm very passionate about is just defining, well, just saying, first of all, mobility is not flexibility. And I think a lot of times that is just thrown out, like either or. And so just understanding that mobility is like your active range of motion versus flexibility, which is your passive range of motion. And to achieve mobility, since that's your active, how much you already possess, you can't just improve your mobility through passive efforts. And so I think, I talked about this a lot on my Instagram, like probably too much, but I think it's important because there's a lot of misinformation out there of, oh, just hold this stretch, just stretch for 30 seconds in these positions, and then that's going to increase your flexibility. Well, that's fine, and it might, but we also need to be mobile because, again, we need to be able to possess strength in those positions. And so that's kind of something I'm very passionate about. So, kind of going into that rabbit hole of like mobility versus flexibility. Um, Doing some type of like isometric holds, for example. So if you're in a position, these are called pails and rails, and I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but your pails and rails are like isometric holds, and that's how our body temporarily bypasses your stretch reflex. Um, stretch reflex, sorry. And so that temporarily opens up new range of motion. And so kind of once you've done that, and this is very high level, you follow that up with some type of active input. So maybe you're going to complement that movement with like external rotation liftoffs. If you're working shoulder external rotation, pails and rails, you're trying to open up that space, then you follow it up with something else that complements it. It kind of fills in that gap. So that's mobility. Flexibility is simply sitting in a hamstring stretch, for example, or just hanging out. So there's no active input, there's no isometric efforts. So kind of on my end, that is where that's like high level mobility versus flexibility. And so, it's good to be flexible, but you also need to possess strength through different ranges of motion. So that's
mhm.
where I'll leave it there.
Nice. That you left on the perfect like ending sentence where you said strength through range of motion. That's my like into the next point where I think this is one of those things where more isn't always better, like most things. You have to think about, as with most training, like ultimately us as coaches, like the big reason why we do what we do and why you should hire or look to those people is there's the why behind of it. So you give them like, here's what I'm trying to obtain, and then it's usually on the professional to understand how you get there through the means of like operations. So when you're talking about like flexibility and mobility, what's your goal at the end of the day? So a lot of people say, well, I need to become more flexible. And I'm like, okay, well, why? Well, I don't know. I can't like touch my toes. And I'm like, okay, well, how useful is you touching your toes in what you do in your life? If it's for some reason very useful, cool, you're probably the outlier. Most people, there's never really a real reason that they need to be able to stand up tall and like touch their toes, hands to the floor. Like, when are you going to really use that? So there's like my first counterpoint to like, I don't know, can you bend over a little bit? You're probably good. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things. And then, so yeah, you said it. Flexibility is a static hold. So basically, think about what you said. You're like the typical reach down, touch your toes. That's it. You're holding it. You're hanging it out. People love doing this for 30 seconds, 60 seconds. That's static stretching. Mobility is through the range of motion, like you said. So think about like your mobility in a squat, in a lunge, something like that. How low you can get into a movement where you are starting in one position, ending in a position, coming out of it, etc. That is going to have a much bigger carryover to your day-to-day life. You're squatting down to play with your kid. You're doing X, Y, or Z to, I don't know, move something. etc. That's where mobility comes in. And then adding strength into that mobility is the biggest thing. So once you have your mobility in a space where you feel like it's applicable, now whether that's your day-to-day usefulness or in a strength and conditioning or hypertrophy context where you're trying to target the muscle in the best way you can. If your squat depth, for example, is at parallel or under, research shows you're pretty good in terms of that's going to yield pretty close to optimal benefits if you give it enough time and load it up correctly. So, do you need to keep going until you can get ass to grass before it becomes the most effective? Not really. If you're someone who just that isn't really a easy thing to do, and your ROI on that's going to take you forever to try to get to, versus just like, hey, let's start loading you up and getting you stronger through whatever your range is. That's great. So I think the take home point is what I'm trying to say is yes, more range of motion under load is great, but at the end of the day, like you should be getting stronger under load in those ranges. That's what's going to carry over. That's what kind of defines strength is your ability to handle load in ranges of motion, active ranges of motion, squats, lunges, a push up where you're deep into, this like for this pressing position where you have to push yourself up off the ground, things like that. Like that's what's going to get you actually applicably stronger in real life, not just how low can I stretch and hold it with no load under it, nothing. So that's where I think mobility is the key. And just enough of it that gets you stronger, that applies to what you're doing in your life, your job, whatever. And then from there, just get really strong in that position. So it might be a parallel squat versus an ass to grass squat. That's great. If you can squat 400 pounds for reps, with parallel, you're pretty strong in a useful range of motion. I would say you're not gonna have any problems in life squatting down, playing with your kids, etc. You know what I mean? That's my
Yeah.
random all over the place rant on.
Relating it back to real life and like what is the goal and like kind of to quote Vernon Griffith, like keep the main thing the main thing. But more is not better, especially when it comes to hypermobility. My little pedestal here. And I'm like a case study here of I did a ton of mobility and I had a lot more problems because I layered an already really mobile body on top like I layered more mobility on top of an already mobile body. And so like hypermobility, we crave stability. And so like you said, lifting through like a healthy range of motion, building strength through different phases of each range of motion is really important. So I just say like you like tie it all together. Like more is definitely not better. Um, being better than you were before is better, you know?
Yeah, and I would even add too. I forgot to include this. If we're talking like from an athletic perspective too, you talked about the stretch shortening cycle a little bit, which if people that don't know what that is, basically that's the transition point from let's talk about a squat for example. When you descend down to a squat, that's called the eccentric or basically the negative, as you probably know it. When you get to wherever your bottom range is and you come back up, that transition point from snapping from that down to up position, that's basically your body's way of rubber banding up. So what happens is your tissues and your tendons, what they want to do in that position is help recoil you like a spring up into that position. So how this relates back to if you are an athlete of any kind and your goal is to have some sort of explosive nature, or even if you're like an elite strength athlete, like this applies to you too. You want to utilize that reflex to move the most amount of weight, such as powerlifters. You don't want to be so mobile and flexible that you're basically picture of your tissues in that are the muscles and stuff that are used in a squat are so lengthened out that you can go way low and there's no spring bounce back because they're not very tight. That actually affects your performance in high strength or high explosive sports because you want to utilize as much possible. If you're going up for a dunk in basketball, you want to be able to snap down and have your tendons be a little bit tight so that they get to their resting point and they want to snap back. They don't want to keep going lower, lower, lower. That's what's going to give you that spring for you to get higher, be more explosive, etc. So there actually is a point where if you're an athlete in any regard, you don't actually want a ton of mobility. And that's kind of like the opposite of what some of these sport coaches talk about is, well, we got to do some stretching beforehand. My biggest pet peeve is prolonged static stretching before athletic activity because what you're doing is lengthening those tissues temporarily to get really like stretched out. Picture like a piece of dough, like getting really ripped out versus having them be a lot more tight knit so they can snap and be more explosive and dynamic in the sport you're playing. So that's another like caveat too is if you're in an athletic sport for power, speed, strength, anything like that, you don't want a ton of excessive flexibility and mobility because it's going to actually limit your ability to snap and explode and move the most amount of weight, whatever that looks like. So just a caveat too, if that's your primary goal is you don't want a ton of extra for no reason.
Straight facts. That also like got me thinking on something else now, which is also understanding like when to not fix something. And I think we kind of talked about this earlier in like our other episode, but it's almost like if this athlete has like an adaptation to a movement and it's worked for them for a very long time, or maybe they lack a certain range of motion, but they are super successful, it's like at what point, you can't sit there and say we have to increase their ankle dorsiflexion because it's not at an optimal amount, but they're super successful and they're healthy and they've been like this for their whole life. So, kind of same thing there is like, movement efficiency is very dependent on one, like how you've learned to move your body throughout the years. Like, even if you do have a limited range of motion in a certain joint, if it works for that person and they're not injured or they're not hurting, it's kind of like, do we change this and then maybe decrease their performance? Like, it's kind of a risky thing. Um, so yeah, that kind of made me think about that too.
Yeah, it's just all on ROI. It's like you have to ask yourself, why are we going to do what we're about to do, and how does that impact? Like, is trying to get that small extra bit of this for it to just look better, or maybe feel better, or maybe get them an extra 5 pounds on their squat or an extra half an inch on their vert? Like, is the process of relearning, teaching, practicing that worth it, or is it worth just keeping them where they are, keep loading them up? It's natural to them. They don't have to overthink their movements. They're not like progressing in any way. Like, it's all that. So anytime you want to make any changes, you have to ask, what's the point? What's the end goal here, and how is that going to affect the process leading up to it, and is that worth it? It's just ROI, the
Right.
return on your investment. So
Agreed. All right.
cool. Is that topic? One
I
down.
think so.
Sweet.
Okay, number two.
Number two. Let's see. I'll bounce into this. This should hopefully be a little bit of a shorter one, but um, we shouldn't still have to have this conversation. But we're gonna talk about it real quick.
Let us hear
Training
it.
for kids. Okay, this is an
Mm,
old myth that since like the 50s when the original study came out that people based this claim off of, which is misinterpreted, which I'll actually go into in a sec. Um, Lifting for kids, stunting growth plates, dangerous, don't do it, etc. So uh, I'll kind of go after a couple main points here, and then we'll see what we need to add from there. So first off, if you didn't know, training with athletes is, or young athletes, or just young population in general, they don't even have to be athletes, is incredibly safe when they are old slash mature enough to handle, understand directions, and basically take it seriously for what it is. So whatever age that ends up being, some people it's 3 or 4 years old, some people it's not till they're 12 or 13. So it depends on that. Second, I would highly recommend they have a desire to want to do it. If you force them to do it, that's going to lead to probably a leak in the first part of them paying attention and comprehending it because they don't want to be there. Thus, they might just be doing it because you want them to, and then they do something that they're not listening to, and then they get injured. So it kind of ties into first and foremost, they got to be understanding of what's going on and they want to do it. And then after that, as long as they're under supervision and taught by an actual professional who understands progressions, teaching movements, and then from there, progressively implementing more load, things like that, like you would with anyone of any age, totally safe. As long as you have those three things in check, it is completely safe for them. In fact, it increases their bone density because you are applying load to their tissues and their bones. Um, just like anyone else would. It increases bone density. It's actually better because they're in such a prime state of their bodies growing that anything you can do to increase their bone density is great because we talk about kids breaking and fracturing bones in their body. It's because their bodies are growing at such a rapid rate that they don't know how to control their bodies and land or absorb forces that they fall on their arm and now their arm's broken. So getting them stronger actually will help hopefully reduce their ability to or the risk of breaking bones, etc., because their bones and joints have gotten stronger. So that's a big reason for it. Outside of that, like I said, there's really no downside to it as long as they can understand direction and you're good to go. The study, here's what I want to talk about. The study that people base this off of, it was actually in the 50s. It was a Chinese kids working in a mine in China doing like mine work. And basically, what that original study that got this all rolling was they looked at how they were smaller than their peers. These kids that worked in these mine scenarios, they were smaller and less structured than their peers, but they accounted it to the working conditions they were in. So basically, oh, they were lifting, doing physical activity. That's what it was. When it wasn't looking at the possible malnourishment of them working 16 hours in a mine as kids, not getting fed enough food, and their bodies not growing at an optimal rate because they weren't fed and had the nutrition aspect in check. So when they actually looked back into that later, and they did more studies further on, when they looked at these kids at similar ages, resistance training or not, there was no difference over a large mean of kids. So that myth was basically just they very likely were malnourished, not because they did, you know, crazy physical labor and things like that. So it's very safe.
Wow.
I'm tired of this being passed around. I love seeing 4 year or 6 year olds on Instagram doing sick lifts with great technique. And I'm like, that's awesome. And then you see the people saying they're going to stay 4 foot forever. Grinds my gears. Like, people just read like one of 20 papers we have that are peer reviewed that explain all this, you know? So that's my spiel. If you want to add anything.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for bringing it up. And I think just talking about that, and I've never read that study, but that's really interesting. And it's funny that people were making us like make forming their opinions off of that when it's so different than lifting weights and being fed well.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of a difference there, and like not working 16 hours a day. Um, but yeah, I think also just like overall, like besides the physical benefits of lifting for kids, is like character development. And I think you kind of touched on this as well. It's just like one, hopefully creating a positive relationship with exercise, which I mean, and introducing it at a young age. Because I feel like it's very easy with all the media that we have today to want to get caught up in like the aesthetics. And even without the media, like we all want to look good, we all want to feel good, but again, there's a lot of misinformation out there, so it's really good to have a coach at that young age be kind of like a role model, to be, someone where they can go ask questions to. So like yeah, fitness aside, I think character development of also like being aware of your body, putting stuff away, just like being like learning how to communicate with like people in your class, just like in school, and just like building community. Like I feel like for me, like this is kind of a tangent, but community is everything. If you've built up a community and then you leave it, you really feel that impact. Um, so yeah, I think weightlifting for kids is a go, and there's a lot of people who are for that. And I think it's just the people who are misinformed who they just need to hear this.
Yeah. And when, like I said, when it's done properly by a
Yeah.
professional, not you, some person who has trained a couple of years in their life, just train themselves, and then you're like, I'm going to go train my kid how to back squat. Wouldn't really recommend that unless you truly are confident in your abilities to teach someone. If you've never trained anyone in your life, don't start with a 5 year old kid. It is, it is its own can of worms if you've never trained anybody, let alone that. So, wouldn't recommend that. But if it's a trained professional, yes. And then also, like, we're seeing more and more studies come out with these kids talking about when they are active in general, physical activity, like their creative abilities are increasing and their mental cognition, their ability to remember and recall things, like everything, like as you would assume, a naturally positive correlation with mental health, with physical health, everything. So outside of just obviously the physical traits of it, I mean, you're talking about, yes, character development, confidence, and implementing, good health protocols early on in their life so it carries into their life. Um, Better performance in school, most likely more energy, better sleep, like the list goes on. So as long as it's under great
Right.
supervision, like as long as they want to do it and they're old enough to comprehend stuff, boom, like it's a go, truthfully. So, yep.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I wish I had guidance in the weight room
Oh
when I
yeah.
was younger. Like in high school, especially, like this is a little older than like 5-year-olds now, but like high school time, I was on the swim team and I did not have a strength coach. Like we literally just went to swim practice. And I just always think, I'm like, man, I could have been so good. Like I was okay. I was like most improved um on my high school team,
Oh yeah.
but I'm just wondering what my potential could have been, you
Well,
know?
or
And
like,
so, yeah.
oh sorry, not to cut you off.
I was gonna say it just would enhance,
Yeah. Oh
my
yeah.
improvements.
Well, and like what I had when I was playing high school ball, which remember this is 2014 to 2018. This isn't even like 30 years ago. This is, oh God, we're coming up on a decade since I first entered high school. Jeez.
Oh, you're
That's when I first started training, was almost 10 years ago. It was my first ever time with weights, was freshman football. We had just the sport, one of the sport coaches was the weight coach. Now we're getting into a development where we're getting qualified strength coaches in high schools, which is great. But we're getting sport coaches who will just recycle stuff from 30, 40 years ago when they were kids. Hey, we're doing 10 by whatever on squat, bench, deadlift 3 times a week, plus this and this and this. Like, it's crazy. I've seen this stuff that, I mean, I experienced. I remember vividly the most core memory I have is like with strength conditioning was we came back from a Friday night football game. We had Saturday morning film and lift like we always do. It's like 7 a.m. So it's like 8 hours post game. And our strength coach at the time sounded like he was more qualified than an average sport coach. Gave us a 10 by 10 on back squat with like 70% of our one rep max. Now picture doing 100 reps of back squat just over 8 hours after a full contact football game, middle of the season. You probably got like 5 hours of sleep that night because everyone goes out and parties, whatever. Half the team's hungover or whatever. And you're doing a 10 by 10 back squat as a recovery lift. Like it's crazy. It's crazy where
Wow.
stuff starts for these kids now. So I'm like, yeah, if you basically the earlier these kids get proper strength conditioning and weights training, like, man, you clear out a lot of that stuff that can honestly hurt them more in the long run with
Right.
malpractice. So, yes, big plus, proper weight training for kids, performance training. I'm all about it.
We're for it.
Wait,
Okay. I think that answered that one. All right.
what do you
Number
got?
three. Number three. Um, we're gonna move along into kind of like exercise, maybe prescription and splits we could go with.
Cool.
So kind of under that category. This is where we kind of had some overlap, so we can kind of go back and forth here. But um, basically, you don't need to be working out for 2 hours plus. That's like my biggest thing, and I see that a lot. Um, that and you do need to rest in between your sets. So those are like two things that I see most commonly, especially in corporate fitness, is that a lot of times, and I understand this because I mean, when I was first getting into fitness way back in the day, I had so many goals that just were disorganized and they didn't complement each other. And so I ended up just wanting to do everything. And then that's kind of where you run into conflict. So you need to, these are a lot of things at once, but you need to understand what your goals are and if they complement each other. You need to make sure that you are getting to the main point in the gym. So you're not spending, 2 hours lifting. And what I also see is just doing everything in the same day. Like break it up. Break
Mhm.
it up into a split throughout the week. That way you have enough recovery in between your sessions to get a meaningful adaptation. And so I guess maybe here, if you want to take it over from now, we can kind of chit
Sure.
chat.
Oh God,
Yeah,
okay, there's a lot of directions to go with this.
I know.
I'll try to hit some of the big ones off the top of my head. So, yeah, so this is another case of more isn't always better. The intention behind what you're doing and how you execute it is going to be the driving factor behind the stimulus, which is basically what you're shooting for when you train. You're shooting for a stimulus, something that is greater than what your body is used to, for your body to adapt, overcome, and grow from. That's basically training 101, no matter whether it's for power, speed, strength, hypertrophy, doesn't matter what what your modality is. You're trying to get a little bit higher than what your body is used to some regard, so it can respond to it, adapt to it, and grow from it. That's it. That's how you adapt. That's adaptation. So how you get that, it's not always by doing more. And this comes from someone, my background's in bodybuilding. When I started training in 2018 post high school, and I got into this whole training thing by myself, I used to train 5, 6 days a week because I was a gym rat, like I'm sure many people are or were, especially when you first start out. You just love it. You see kind of the newbie gain phase for the first 6 months to a year where stuff just, I mean, you do stuff half decent, your body's like growing, responding, you're looking better in the mirror, like it's addicting. And so I get it.
Yep.
But now once you start getting down the line and that progress significantly slows and you get what's called diminishing returns, where you have to do even more to get even less results than you've ever gotten before to milk out kind of that last 10%, last whatever it is. And you got to really be strategic about it. You really learn how more isn't necessarily less because one, if you do more with the stuff your body has adapted to already after you've been training for years, you're talking about volume, load, etc. If you go more, 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 your body will get to a point where you are overreaching and become overtrained. You get possibly injured, or you just simply give it too much that it can't recover from. There is too much stress to your body that your body has to spend so much time trying to repair from that it does not have any extra energy or desire to give you plus basically more energy to then grow and adapt to. An example would be if you've been out of the gym for months and you want to come back and you're like, I want to hit legs today, and you do a soul crushing leg day. Now, that sounds fun in premise, and we've all been there, I'm sure, to some degree, where you can't walk for literally a week. While you might think, oh my God, this just made up for me being gone for a month, what you probably just did was damaged your tissues and cells so much that it's taking you a week to get back to normal. That after that week, your body is not going to want to spend more time and energy giving you a little extra to adapt from it. It is basically in survival mode to get you back to functioning status and let alone extra cherry on top. So there is such thing as training enough to, yes, yield a stimulus. Yes, it should be uncomfortable, but your body should be able to recover from that back to normal and then give you some extra on top of it. Um, so there's basically the premise is, and it is a loaded question. We could talk about programming for days in
Yeah.
terms of what that looks like, but the general premise is more isn't always better. And having an effective workout, my workouts are down to like an hour or less now, most of the time. Now, that's usually because I have gaps between clients. I don't have the luxury of having necessarily 2 hours straight to take my time. Sometimes it's good to have that time. If you do bigger lifts too, if you do barbell lifts, things like that, they can take 45 minutes by themselves to get through. So I understand.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah. When you talk
gosh.
warm ups,
Yes.
prep, when you're resting between sets, if you've never done like, say you're doing 4 or 5 sets of deadlifts, say you got heavy doubles, whatever the criteria is, your rest on those should be between probably 3 to 5 minutes. So you're talking 5 sets, not counting warm ups. Like you're there for 45 minutes in your deadlifts. Like if you're on a proper strength training like program, not just getting in there doing minute rest, whatever weight you got on the bar. Like if you're strategic about it, that will take a lot of time. So there is a time and place for longer workouts. Absolutely. Remember, this is talking about general population. Most people probably listening to this, it's very likely you're doing what's called junk volume, where the stimulus that you're applying each set is not that crazy. For example, you're probably not going close enough to failure that is giving you that feeling of fatigue and exhaustion that you are able to go 6, 7, 8 exercises in a row for 3 or 4 sets each, thus taking you an hour and a half, 2 hours to get through your workout. That's what I see a lot of the time. Now, if you're an elite level training person, then yes, there's a chance you need to go 90 minutes to 2 hours to get to that point. Most people aren't
Right.
there. So a lot of times it's just junk volume. It's not applying every set, every rep is intentional, direct, and challenging. If you do that correct, if you're pushing your sets, where we say close to failure within 2 to 3 reps of you not being able to get another one, after 3 or 4 exercises, there's a very good chance you are done. Like you cannot have that effort very long if you do it that way. So if you do that as your modality of like I'm pushing each set very hard but not to complete failure, so that you're not getting to that point where you are so trashed you can't grow, your workouts will naturally probably find themselves about an hour or less, if I had to guess.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, I'll
And
leave it
like
there
the
for you.
thing is, no, that was all like very beautifully said, and I could not agree more. Um, and it's funny to like look back and see like the evolution of like how you used to lift and like what your lifts look like now. So like for me, I can spend a whole workout like for an hour doing 4 exercises sometimes because the intensity is just that high and I need that much rest. And I lift 3 times a week. So that's another thing. Like your frequency does not need to be, 5 times, 6 times a week, especially if you're working at that intensity. If you're, I mean, the stimulus is going to be potent enough. Like I am very sore after these workouts, and I'm still able to give my body rest and recovery, time to build back and adapt, and then come back next week stronger. So I think just understanding that you don't have to break yourself down every single day because there's just no possible time for recovery. That's not when the gains are made, if you're not recovering, like you said, you're just kind of beating yourself down with a stick. And it just feels like shit, honestly. It doesn't feel good to not progress in the weight room and move more. And sometimes it feels kind of counterintuitive if this is a newer concept to you, where maybe you have a week where you're going, like maybe a deload week, for example, feels like this is pointless, whatever, but then you come back and you feel so much better the next week. So I think just understanding to be more intentional with your workouts and not lifting heavy and doing the same muscle groups every day can go a very long way.
Yep. I'll throw a couple more things in now so I'll also say this is that this doesn't mean just train 3 or 4 times a week and hit everything once and say you're done. Especially the more advanced you become, the higher that stimulus and strategic you have to be to start getting those results. Like I talked about, the diminishing returns, it gets harder and harder the longer you train to get more results. You have to do more and more and be more strategic to get that little bit each time. When you start out, you will adapt to anything. You could literally go in the gym once a week, start there, lift with at least decent technique and decent effort. And you do that for like a month or two, and you will notice results. Now that only stays there so long, and then you have to move the needle forward. But what I'm getting at is, yes, this applies the longer into your training you are. When you start getting close to that 6, 7, 10 year mark, you have to really push it if you're trying to get more and more and more. If you're trying to stay where you are, then that's a whole different conversation. But there is a point where there does need to be more strategy. Now, we do know from the literature that if you want to, from a, let's say a hypertrophy standpoint, which I'm sure most people listening to this are more aligned with than sports performance and those characteristics. They're probably more about how do I look good naked. So let's talk about that. If you want to maximize that, yes, adding some more frequency to your muscles, training, say, hitting your back muscles twice a week versus once, on average will give you a better yield over a long course of time when structured correctly. So let's say if your total volume for your back, let's say you did 12 sets for your back in a week, instead of doing 4 exercises, 3 sets each on one day, if you did 2 exercises, 3 sets each, so you have 6 sets on one day, and then come back 3 days later and do it those other 2 exercises for 6 sets, that is a smart way that you can still get 12 sets of back in a week without, well, or I should say, while having higher quality intensity for those 12 sets each. And that's kind of what you're shooting for. That's where you want more frequency, is to strategically plan out making sure those sets are at an intensity that's good. If you've never done 4 or 5 exercises for back in a row, by the time you get to those fourth or fifth exercises on average, your effort's usually pretty fried. Your back is to that extent pretty fried. So if you split it in half, now you get a great stimulus in 2 different ways, and every couple of days is getting hit. But that comes with you understanding how this kind of flows and works and balancing it all. So it's a loaded question, but there is a place for more frequency when you account for all these variables. You're not just doing 20 sets on one day and then 2 days later you're doing another 20 sets for, like, that's a different story than being strategic and splitting it up, and things like that. And to counter and one more thing to your deload point, where what I talked about is a little bit the first episode with accumulating fatigue. So what that is your body
Hmm.
over the course of weeks, months, whatever it is, accumulates this kind of progressive level of fatigue, whether it's endorphins or hormones in your body, or just breakdown of muscle tissue cells that builds gradually. It's something that you won't notice from day to day or week to week necessarily. But if you're going 12 weeks straight of training, 6 days a week, one day off, and you haven't taken some time off or you haven't lowered the intensity, in fact, maybe it's even gone up over those 12 weeks, there may be a breaking point where one of those reps doesn't feel so great, and that's where you possibly get injured, or that's where stuff just gets really like, oh my God, I mentally don't want to be here. I don't want to train. My body's broken. I don't feel like doing anything. You have officially overtrained at that point. So there is something where you have to think about the long-term picture of what you're doing in an acute span of time, not just, oh, I feel good right now. Like, let's just keep it rolling. You know what I mean? People will take a week off or deload, like you said. And I have clients who will miss a week for whatever reason. They traveled, had work, whatever. And they're like, oh my God, I lost all my results. I'm like, actually, you're probably going to come back and you're probably going to hit more weight or higher. You're going to actually train harder that week you had did nothing, because your body, we might have been going for 10 weeks straight and you needed a time to kind of chill out anyways. And your work naturally pulled you away for a week. And now, you know what I mean? Now you're good to go and you're firing back into it. So there's a lot to be said, but more isn't always better. There's a time and place for it. It's your intensity and how you structure things that's going to gear your adaptation and your results.
1,000%. And there's just so many different possibilities too. And it's dependent on, where you are, like your fitness ages, your goals, etc., limitations. So that's kind of where your coach will come in and be like, okay, this split will be like the right one for you. So that's why I always push to have a coach, because even if you are a coach, because it's great to learn from other coaches of like, what do they know? Get inside their brain a little bit, maybe take a little piece, bring it into your type of your methodology. Because at the end of the day, we all have our own methodology. We've taken a bunch of different courses and we've used little bits of those courses and kind of built it into our own thing. So if you're Gen Pop, if you're just a human that likes to work out listening to this, I always say get a coach, even if it's not for a long time. They can teach you on, proper workout splits and just like managing fatigue, and they can maybe even educate you so you can like make your own workouts eventually, because like we don't want you to depend on us forever, like as much as we love you guys, and I would love to have my people forever, honestly, but there'll come a time where you might not need us anymore. And so at the end of the day, it's like hopefully we leave you better than when we found you,
Yeah, and
type
a
of
good
thing.
coach will want that for you. Now, you have to be careful with who you select, because there will be coaches, and I see this all the time, where their goal is to, as bad as it sounds, keep you in the dark so that you do have a desire to need them. So you keep, it's a service. So you keep paying them and they bring you back. Versus, and sometimes it's just an ego thing where it's like they feel like if I teach them too much stuff, they're just going to get up and walk away. I have clients that I've had for over a year now, which in the grand scheme isn't crazy long when you think it is and it isn't, depending on who you talk to. But my philosophy has always been from day one, I'm going to equip my people from day one with as much as I can to get them to feel confident that if I had to disappear tomorrow, move states, whatever, they had to continue their gym training, whatever it looked like. They felt confident to go in and execute without skipping a beat. That's always my mentality, to chip away day after day, session after session, to give them a little more and learn, let them ask questions, get them to actually understand what we're doing and not just like, hey, here's what you're doing, do this. And then the second I walk away, they have no idea why we just do what we did. Trying to give them the backbone of that. And then ultimately, my philosophy is I want to get my clients to a point where you're right. They feel like they don't need us anymore, but they want to still work with us. And that's like the
Right.
most empowering thing as like a coach and a trainer, where you've like, I hear about people who have clients for 10 years straight. And I'm like, and they're a good, and that's a good trainer talking about that for 30 years in the business. Like, that they've taught them just about all they need to be successful with training. I mean, they've been trained for 10 years together, but that they come back for a multitude of other reasons: the experience, the accountability, the push, whatever it is. Like, it's great. And I'm all for coaches having coaches, because dude, just having the structure of like, I get to just train and listen to someone else tell me what to do. Oh my God, dude. When you're training
There's nothing
people,
better.
when your life and
Nothing.
your career is built around telling people what to do and how to train, it is so nice to turn your brain off for an hour when you get to finally train and let someone gauge your entire training. You're just like, tell me what to do. And you as the trainer, it's great because you already know like how to do your technique on these movements for the most part, like unless they give you something really new. You know what moves feel good. You know like what your warm up should feel like. Like you're very receptive to your body. So they just give you the, hey, here's the execution. And you get to just go and crush it and not have to think at all. They're like, hey, we're doing a 3x8 on this. And you're like, cool. I know what that's supposed to feel like. Oh, we're gonna add 5 pounds. You got that easy. Oh, okay, fine. Like that's the stuff. I'm like, man, like it's so underrated, especially from other coaches. Like if you haven't had that in a while, it's so good when you get another coach coming in and just pushing you a little bit.
It really pushes you too, because sometimes you get comfortable.
Oh
You're
yeah,
like,
and
oh
you're
yeah, I can
tired. You're
do
like
this.
mentally checked
Yeah.
out from clients. You've been around the gym for 8 hours straight, and then I get the end of the day and I got to go train. I've been in this place from sunrise to middle of the day. Like it gets hard to want to like put my headphones on and go train hard. So
Yeah. Well, that's why it's kind of like a little bit off topic, but I don't even care because it's it's not like we have motivation all the time. Because motivation is very, it's fleeting. So motivation is only there like temporarily. So it's more about like the dedication that we have to like just being healthy individuals and being healthy for ourselves and being healthy for our clients and just being able to have abled bodies. That's kind of like my goal at this point in life is as I get older, like I'm gonna be 30 this year. Um, I want to be more athletic than I was when I was younger. Like my early 20s were terrible. My body was broken and now I'm almost 30 and I really want to keep, improving from there. So, um, yeah, ties it all together. Get a coach. That's what I have. I don't have to do my programming anymore. Like I dreaded having to do my own programming. So it just is like a little mini vacation. Like it's kind of like working out as a treat. You don't
yeah,
really like dread it as much
sure.
on certain times.
Yep.
Uh, yeah. Anyways, let's go for one more.
Cool. You want me to pick it?
Bring us home, Garrett.
Okay, let's touch on. So I guess we talked about the training aspect of things. Let's talk a little bit about like what practical nutrition stuff looks like, because we're
I
in
was
an
thinking that
era
one too.
of fad. I mean, we've always been in an era of fad diets. It's the next thing to reinvent the wheel to get people to see the weight on the scale go down, etc. So how do I want to approach this? Let's see. So my general recommendations, let me lead with this. When it comes to nutrition, there is not a right or wrong answer for how you structure nutrition. I hate the word diet, but let's, for the sake of this, a right or wrong diet. When we're talking about diet, I'm talking about intermittent fasting, ketogenic, Atkins, whatever the heck these people do these days. Carnivore, that's one. Whatever. Those diets that associate themselves
The
to
Liver
specific
King.
categories, there's no right or wrong one. The diet, or the nutrition plan, as I like to prefer to say, that is most optimal for you is the one that you can adhere to long term. That does not mean 1 month, 3 months. That doesn't even mean a year. That means what can you do for the next 10, 20 years of your life that has a structure built in that can pivot and change based off how your life dynamic goes, what your training goals become, and all those things included into one. That's what a sound nutrition plan looks like. So for some people, That might be they feel really great genetically and mentally. They feel good on, they respond really well to something that's a lot lower carb diet. Great. Maybe they are some of the few. I say some of the few because traditionally I feel like on the ketogenic diet, there is a very small portion of people that can genuinely, when I say, can you do this properly for 10, 20 years, there's a very small population that can. If you can, great. I know people, if my friends and people who know me in the training sphere, I bag a little bit on the ketogenic diet, and not necessarily because there's something specifically wrong with that or I'm biased towards carbs, but I am a little bit biased towards carbs because I know their results and what they do for training and things like that. So when people talk about a ketogenic diet, but they also want to become jacked, strong, and powerful and move better and all this, but then they limit the main food source that gives them the energy to do that, it's counterproductive. So I get a little bit, but they're told they don't need it, all this stuff. So to try to tie it back in here, whatever nutrition plan that works for you, that you can follow, you feel great on, that you can adjust on, based off where your life takes you, things that come up, make it harder, stressful, changing training plan. Maybe you're trying to gain weight, lose weight, get stronger, get leaner, whatever. You can adjust based off that and keep it consistent 80 to 85% of the time over the next 10, 20 years. That is what you want to spend your energy on. You do not want to chase trends or chase a short term weight loss that will inevitably set you up to rebound back to where you were, or if not worse, and oftentimes cause you to even lose muscle mass by the time all that process is done. And now you feel even worse about yourself psychologically, physically, emotionally. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my first tidbit. I'll let you add if you want to add something.
Okay, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, so like for me, um, that's kind of something I would love to get a little bit more education on, like a little bit more like in depth. I'm very surface level with nutrition, but everything you said is very spot on. And there's also like we also need to make sure as coaches, which I know you don't do this, but like we are not dietitians. We're not, I mean, unless you have a like a nutrition certification, you can do certain things within that with that certification. Like if you're a nutrition coach, that's awesome. But there's a clear difference between being a dietitian and a coach and like a nutrition coach.
And an
And
Instagram
so,
guru,
an Instagram guru,
very bottom of the
no
barrel.
certification.
Like, but they're the ones who are the loudest. Go on, sorry.
Why do their voices get out there?
Because they're on a lot of substances and fun things that make them look super jacked and lighting with a pump, and people want to look like them. That's
Yes,
why.
I mean, yeah. Anyways, yes, I agree. And so your registered dietitian is going to help you build your meal plan. They have gone through lots of school to be able to help you with that, and they like know all the science behind that. Your nutrition coach can go a little bit more surface level. Your coaches, we can give you again surface level guidelines on like how to make better choices. Um, so that's kind of like my first bit there. And then also something that we kind of you and I talked about before the episode is how like eating too little eventually is going to be like, again, that's not going to help you reach your goal. So if you want abs, for example, sure, you might have to go into a slight caloric deficit, but that's going to be, again, you're not going to live in that all year, hopefully. And so, I'm not into really bodybuilding just because of my background, but um, they don't live that lean year round because that would just be chaotic for your hormones.
It's literally impossible.
Uh, it's impossible, right?
Literally impossible. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't.
Right. And so, and then like coming back from being that low in body weight, I know I've heard stories that it's really hard to regulate your hormones sometimes after that. So you have to be really careful. But eating too little does not equal losing weight. Uh, Appropriately, I should say. Everything in moderation. So if you're gonna go like from 0 to 100 real fast, you're gonna cut down, 1200 calories a day. I'm sorry. I don't approve of that at all. You're eating enough to survive, like to breathe air, and then that's it, in my opinion. So that might be more of an opinion. But if you're lifting weights and you're trying to build muscle mass, you got to work your ass off. You got to eat the protein. I always say prioritize your protein. Eat it first. Honestly, if you get full really fast, eat your protein first. And if you're trying to bulk, just forget your feelings and just eat. But
Yes.
yeah, that's my bit.
Um, I love that. Yes, eat protein. Yes, bulking can suck depending on who you are. Okay, let's see. So yes, to piggyback, yes, technically we are not supposed to, we being trainers, coaches, whoever, anyone who's not a, a dietitian, things like that, should not be giving specific. Now it happens still. They're not going to have an FBI agent showing up at your door, but it happens. But technically, no, you shouldn't. How I take nutrition approaching with my clients is I guide them towards patterns and long-term behavior change that will get them in the right direction, and then I give them a very overlying perspective on what their day should look like from a calorie intake perspective overall, based off where they're at, which takes some trial and error depending on where they're at and what they weigh, their age, gender, um, their training, their just where they're currently at. It changes. That number is all over the place, so you have to kind of find it. But what I will say is the biggest thing is getting them into habits that will set them up for whether they're trying to lose weight, gain weight, whatever. So whether that's, hey, consistent eating, tracking your things to get an understanding where you are. I have all my clients, I recommend it no matter who you are. I don't respectfully, if you're like, I don't want to track, respectfully, if you can't do that and take 3 to 4 minutes out of your day total to track your food when you want to start, gaining and losing weight is a numbers game. If you truly want to do that, it is a numbers game when playing with how much energy your body burns and how much energy you are consuming. That is weight loss. I don't care who tells you it's hormones. I don't care who tells you it's carbs. It's this. It is quite simply the energy you take in versus the energy you spend. So it's a numbers game. If you are eating less than you burn, congratulations, you are losing weight. If you are eating more than you burn, congratulations, you are gaining weight. Now, how you get there is where things come in from coaches that make it realistic. To give people some numbers, if you want to grab a notepad and write some things down, I'm going to give you some very baseline numbers from what I have gotten from people much smarter than me and confirmed and experienced and done with. So, protein intake, if you're not sure, the number a lot of people throw around is a 1-to-1 ratio. That's a great number to shoot for. Realistically, that's really hard. I have clients who are 175 pounds and they eat 50 grams of protein in a day. If I tell them you need to start eating 175 grams of protein, they go, I got to 80 yesterday and I was full. And I go, good job.
Yeah.
175 that is a huge jump. If you've never tripled your protein intake from what you've done for years, it is insanely difficult. So, realistic approach here. Yes, if you can shoot for that as a kind of easy number to remember, great. Realistically though, if you're getting the low end of that, zero point 0.7, so let's say you weigh 200 pounds, if you're eating between 140 and even like 180, 200, anywhere in that range, you're solid. So we start by building you up. Say you're eating 60 grams a day. If we can get you week one to start getting to 70, 75, 80, great. Maybe the next week you find some more strategies or you add a little bit more, you're getting closer to 90, great. Over the course of 2 months, you're finally like, I found a way to get pretty consistently into that 140 range or higher. Congratulations. That's our goal. You can't scare people away with trying to make a drastic change, especially when it comes to food, because protein's so satiating and it's so hard to jump 3x up like that. So
Mm,
protein intake, if
I
you're
couldn't
eating
believe it.
anything from zero point 0.7 to 1 to 1 ratio of your body weights, you're doing great. That's all you need year round. Don't care what anyone says. You don't need 2, you don't need 1.5. If you are at zero point 0.7, even at the low end, that is great for what you need for the high majority of people, unless you are an elite athlete. Carbs, this one's going to be fluctuating based off how you are. Carbs and fats is basically what's going to juggle based off how you feel. Calories and protein, I tell my clients, are the king. Calories first, that's going to dictate whether they're going up, going down, staying the same. Protein intake is going to be one of the biggest things for their muscles repairing, getting into the next session, not feeling so beat down, and actually growing from it. So those are the two big things, and on top of appetite. That's the biggest thing too. A lot of people want to lose weight. Protein is going to help you a lot naturally eat less food when you get that number up. So calories, protein are king. Carbs and fats come in secondary based off how you feel. Fats shouldn't be any lower realistically than about 25% of your total calories for hormonal reasons, especially for women. You want that number to probably sit 25. Men, maybe you can get away with like 20%. These are rough numbers. Everyone's different, giving you some ideas here. But hormonally, you do not want to drop one of those ranges. And then your carbs can kind of fill up the rest. Carbs are great. You train hard. Your carbs are what your body pulls from when you train and you recover. You need carbs. Eat carbs. Eat carbs. Now, how much you
Eat
eat,
carbs.
how much you need to eat is dependent on those numbers that you're trying to hit, where you're at. But that is basically the rough blueprint. Now, with whether you're losing or gaining weight, it's one of those things you don't want to go drastic. So, a good rule of thumb that I've always learned is that when you're losing weight, you shouldn't exceed a deficit that is 1% of your body weight a week. So, let's say you weigh 200 pounds because it's a nice even number. You ideally should not be trying to lose more than, at the very high end of it, 2 pounds a week at that weight. Okay. So, this varies based off your 100 pounds. 1 pound a week is your cap. Congratulations. Okay. Now that's so that you do not pull into a lot of muscle tissue. You're pulling mostly from adipose, your fat, and it's very sustainable. The more aggressive you get, the harder it is to keep your hunger in check. The more likely you are to fall off. The more likely you are to eat a ton, binge, etc. And then you're more likely to lose mass, the good kind of mass, and your training will likely diminish from energy levels. So realistically, I tell people a very low deficit, usually 300 to 500 calories under your maintenance. Write it out. Yes, it takes a while. Yes, it's much more sustainable. Yes, you can still train hard and you won't lose nearly as much muscle mass by the time you get down there. Same goes in the other direction for bulking. I mean, if you're 250, 300 calories over your maintenance, you'll add very little weight on a weekly, monthly basis, but very little of it will be fat. So you do not get super big and
Right.
spongy going 6 pounds a month of weight gain. And you wonder why you've lost every resemblance of an ab on your body and you feel just only a little bit more jacked. Okay. You got to go back the other direction too at some point. So those are some loose numbers. Like I said, I'm not a dietitian. I am giving you rough ranges. They will change for everybody. But these are kind of the numbers that when you talk to people in the nutritional space, they will give you these rough ideas. If you're looking for a guideline, consult with a dietitian, consult with someone way smarter than me, qualified for more specific questions. But those are some numbers if you're not sure where to go. You don't want to go too high, don't want to go too low, too aggressively.
I think that's just, we should keep it there. That is well said. I cannot top that. Honestly, if you're gonna take anything from today's episode, just please eat your carbs. Like just be friends with them. Like rice is not bad. Potatoes are not bad. And everything in moderation is great. And honestly, like just if you've just like gone through the brain fog of like withdrawal, like not having enough carbs. Like I've done that before where I was terrified of carbs. And so like, way back in the day. And so I would exercise a lot and I did not eat enough carbs. And I thought I needed glasses, but it was actually like the brain fog that I was experiencing from not having enough carbs. So they're not bad. They're your friend. You're gonna feel so great. You'll probably be happier when you eat them.
Find what the biggest thing here is find what, just like with your training, find what works well with your body. So it might not be,
Right.
you might be like, man, I hate rice. I hate it. I feel worse on it, but I love, say, a more grainy type of, say you like brown rice, say you like a certain pasta. Find the things that your body responds really well to, you feel good on, that can satiate you, that you enjoy, that you can eat consistently. Find those things. There's not a right or wrong food, just like there's not a right or wrong exercise to do. It's really just trial and error, truthfully. It's trial and error and sticking it out, knowing that it's a long term play. It's not a what's the fastest way I can drop 30 pounds. It's how can I lose 30 pounds in a way that's sustainable, that didn't feel too crazy difficult, and that I can keep off by the time I get there for the next 10 years as I go through challenges in life, go out and enjoy life, these events, eating out, excuse me, etc. So that should be your overarching goal when it comes to training nutrition is how do I improve my quality of life in the long term, not just the short term where it can bleed into an even worse effect.
Right. Like make it enjoyable.
Yeah, life's too
We
short.
want to enjoy we want to enjoy life.
Life is way too short.
Yes. Yes, it is. That indeed.
And don't wear a waist trainer.
Oh,
I had to
ooh.
I had to plug that. If you have a coach or trainer who has ever let you wear a waist trainer or encouraged it, fire them, block them, and never ever listen to a word they say again. You should never wear a waist trainer. I will die on this hill. You are pushing your organs up into your body. Your waist looks temporarily smaller. Congratulations, you might have caused permanent organ damage. I had to
Congratulations.
throw it in. I had to. I was sitting here. I was like,
So
if
good.
the LOL note on my notes, I was like, don't just.
LMAO in all
I see
caps.
them once a blue moon, and I cry every time. I want to just come over and just rip it off and be like, I don't care if you're mad at me. I'm lighting it on fire. You're welcome.
Have you seen that meme? It's like I cry and it's just
Yes.
like it's Gooby. Gooby, please. It's like
Yes.
I cry.
I put a
When did
waist
you
trainer in the
turn
center
that
of it.
into a meme?
Don't wear a waist trainer, people. Yes, your waist looks a little more snatched. No, your organs do not feel better at the end of it.
Well, that and okay, yeah, don't do that. And also like snatching your waist, you can't do that from just doing some targeted
Can't
ab
spot
exercise.
reduce fat. You cannot target where you want to lose weight. You need to be in a calorie deficit. It goes back to all those things I just talked about for 5 minutes. And be consistent and have muscle mass.
Mic drop. I think we're done. That was it.
Boom.
That's all I wanted to say. I think you summed it up all right there.
Yep.
If you're gonna listen, honestly, I should probably just warn people. If you want to listen to like the most important part of this episode, just listen to like the very end here.
Yeah, just listen to Don't Wear a Waist Trainer and then turn it off.
Yeah, and turn it off. You're good. That's all you need to know. That's the keys to fitness,
Just-
honestly. Yeah. Anyways, Garrett, my guy,
Emma,
thank you so much for being here again.
of course, my pleasure. This was fun.
Yeah, we'll be coming back for a third time, I feel
Dude,
it.
whenever you need a guest, hit me up. I could talk about stuff for tens of hours in this field.
I know. I love it.
Like
I
I'm
love it.
sitting here like, oh, we're over an hour in, and I'm like, I tried to keep some of the topics to like short levels too. I was like, try not to go on for like 30 minutes. Like we could do a whole episode on trading, on nutrition. Like I could.
That's
There's
what I want to
so many
do.
avenues, and I was like, how do I give the major points? And I'm going back like, man, I already missed over like 80 different things I could have talked about on, you know, trying to keep it short though, so we don't just ramble
Listen,
on.
it's not the last time. It's not a goodbye. It's a see you later.
So I'll see you in like 3 weeks probably.
Yeah. When I send that telepathic message to your
Oh
brain and you text me again, that'd
yes,
be great.
can't wait.
All right, Garrett. Peace.
Peace.
Oh, I almost